November 17, 1941. 2:13 hours. Western approaches, 120 miles west of Ushant. The Vickers Wellington's geodetic frame hums like a tuning fork as wind scours the skin. Inside, it smells of oil, wet canvas, and stale tea. Flight Lieutenant Tom Hallett hunches over the yoke, peering into a blackness that feels solid. In the dim cave behind him, the ASV operator, Sergeant Taff Morgan, bends to his cathode ray tube, face lit sickly green. Contact, bearing 085, range 4 miles, steady, Morgan says, voice clipped, Welsh vowels smoothed by oxygen and nerves. The blip crawls, a fat smear against sea clutter. Hallett answers with his hands, easing the Wellington GR down, throttles advancing until the Bristol Pegasus radials pick up a deeper note. The altimeter unwinds. The ocean rises from ink to suggestion. You feel your boots tingle to the steady, gentle tremor of airframe and prop. 3 miles. The ASV trace jitters. Morgan rides the gain with his thumb, jaw muscles working. Hold her, hold her. Ahead, there's nothing. Not even a smudge of phosphorescence. Somewhere out there a U-boat rides the surface, diesel exhaust blown clear by a cold Atlantic wind, batteries drinking, crew on the bridge huddled under scarves and greatcoats. It's a nightly ritual, surface to charge, dive by day. Coastal Command knows the rhythm. They can find the music. They can't see the band. 2 miles. Sea return blooms, a ragged ghost masking the blip. Morgan swears softly. Losing him at 1.8, sea clutter, stand by, steady your heading. Hallett holds course, eyes flicking between the black windscreen and the luminous ring of a drift sight that shows nothing but moving night. We'll try flares, he says. Stand by on the rack. You reach up and feel for the toggle, glove squeaking against the switch guard. 1 click. A parachute flare clatters down the tube and vanishes. Far off the port bow, a yellow star falls, then blooms into a cold, swinging daylight that makes the waves look like hammered tin. It lights nothing where it matters. Contact lost, Morgan says, softer now. He's gone to ground. Hallett breathes out through his teeth, listening to the hurt in the engine's note that only a tired pilot hears. He banks, slow, patient, dragging the flare's scarf of light across the sea one last time. In the glow's edge, you think you see a wake smearing. Your stomach lifts. Then the flare gutters. Darkness rushes in again, complete and smug. They turn for home. In the rear turret, the gunner cranks elevation and scans a horizon that never changes. The intercom clicks with small, domestic noises, someone swallows, someone coughs into a sleeve. Morgan folds his arms on the set and rests his head, just for a second, on equipment that hums like a cat. Dawn breaks cold and thin over Devon. RAF Chivener's single-row huts hunker under a sky the color of wetted steel. The Wellington rolls to a stop, brakes complaining. Men in duffel coats lift chocks with red hands. On the dispersal, the crew climbs down and turns their collars up against a wind that seems to come through your coat, not around it. In a borrowed hut that smells of damp and chalk dust, Squadron leader Humphrey de Lee stands at a blackboard, sleeves rolled, chalk snapping under his fingers. He's an odd hero for a night war, slight, precise, an RAF staff officer who looks like a schoolmaster until you notice the way other men stop fidgeting when he speaks. On the board, a Wellington side profile, a cylinder slung beneath her belly, fat as a barrel. The last mile is where we lose them, Lee says. ASV gives us to 2 miles. At 1, sea clutter blinds us. Flares announce us. The U-boat skippers have learned the timing. They dive, and we're left throwing charges into their wash. Group Captain Frank Hops leans in a doorway, collar up, watching the chalk turn idea into hardware. And your lamp does what our flares cannot. Lee taps the chalk against the drawn barrel. It gives us light only when we choose, in the instant we want it. A carbon arc searchlight. 24 inches. Slung under the fuselage or wing. It will throw daylight down to 1,200 yards. We hold the ASV plot to a mile, kill it, go in, and at the moment of truth we put a sun on him. He cannot go under fast enough. His lookouts are blind. We drop a stick across his bow while he's still finding the ladder. Power? Hops asks. A dedicated generator aft, belt-driven. The arc is temperamental, but we can mount the carbons on a sprung holder to ride out the bumps. Switch on the throttle quadrant. Pilot's thumb. Leigh looks up, eyes bright in a tired face. No flares. No warning. There are obstacles, and Leigh knows them better than anyone. Ministry of Aircraft Production, skeptical. Coastal Command, perpetually short of everything. Crews, wary of odd attachments that promise miracles. Leigh pushes anyway. He borrows men, space, time. He makes the problem visible with chalk and stubbornness. In a hangar at Thorney Island, a Wellington sits with her belly open like a whale on a slipway. A carpenter's pencil marks the curve of a fairing that will cradle a light bright enough to turn night to noon. The first test flight is a study in nerves. The lamp sputters, catches, throws a white tongue that reaches down and dances on the water like a living thing. The arc hisses, the filaments crackle, the generator's belt slaps and then settles. Down low at 600 feet, the pilot thumbs the switch, the world below blooms, and men on a trawler off Portland Bill stare up as if an angel has found them. Leigh watches from the aisle, one hand on the back of the pilot's seat, knuckles pale. The pilot's goggles glint. The light goes out and leaves an afterimage in everyone's eyes. It takes a few minutes before anyone can speak and not sound like a church. Again, Leigh says. A week later, they'll show it to Air Vice Marshal Sir Philip Joubert de la Ferté on a grey morning in Lime Bay. The demonstration is brisk, unshowy. The lamp comes on and makes a destroyer look like a stage set. Joubert says, very quietly, "You may proceed." Outside, the wind scrapes the field. In the crew room, a rigger wraps his hands around a mug that's too hot to drink. He looks at the blackboard once more, at the chalked cylinder under the sketched Wellington, and allows himself the smallest, most private hope. April 1942. RAF Chivener, North Devon. The River Toll runs brown under a sky stitched with gulls. 172 Squadron lies new on the books and old in the eyes, the kind of unit raised in a hurry from men who already know how to be patient. On dispersal, Wellington GR-MK8, G for George, squats under a tarpaulin while fitters fuss at the big fairing bolted under her belly. The thing looks like a barnacle that's decided to be a cannon. Squadron leader Humphrey de Verdley moves between airplane and flight office like a foreman and a father both. He stops to study the arc housing through his spectacles, thumb on his lip. Mind the spring assembly, he says, not looking up. She'll want to bounce with the airframe. If she chatters, she'll shed carbons like a drunk loses teeth. Flight Lieutenant Bill Searle, who will fly tonight, hides a grin. Understood, sir. We'll keep her dentures in. Searle's crew is a catalogue of Coastal Command types. There's Taff Morgan on ASV, yanked from another crew because everybody wants him on their scope. There's a Canadian second pilot who keeps his humor under his cap brim. There's a depth charge aimer who can judge a stick like a bowler. And you, in the back, wrapped in leather and wool and the kind of silence that doesn't need to be heavy to be complete. In the flight office, a wall map crowded with colored pins dominates the room. Group Captain Frank Hops traces a finger across the Bay of Biscay, toward Brest and Lorient, those concrete pens that make U-boats into wolves with caves. Outbound routes here, here, and here, he says. They're using the night to run their batteries and the day to sulk. You'll take the western lane. Radar silence except for short peaks. Altitude 600 down to 3 when you commit. The lamp is yours to choose. Metox? Searle asks. He's read the reports, whispers about a German box that hears our radar before our radar sees them. Not yet, Hop says. If they've got a trick, it isn't in wide use. What we have is what they don't expect. He glances toward the window, where the Wellington's belly seems to make the whole day tilt. Bring me proof we aren't mad. Night comes down like a curtain, heavy and slow. The Pegasus engines cough, fire, and settle. Chalks out. A green wand arcs in the dark. G for George sachets down the runway with that Wellington waddle, then lifts, wheels tucking, lights off. Devon falls away to a black coastline and then the deeper black of an ocean that hides everything except what men force it to show. The ASV set is an animal with moods. Morgan coaxes it, hand on the gain like a conductor. You ride the coastline out, then swing west into a sky with no bottom. Hours pass in the slow quick of watch-keeping. Thermoses get past. Men stare at instruments not because they think the needles will lie, but because they like to watch the truth be steady. Contact, Morgan says suddenly, and nobody breathes for the length of a word. Bearing 090, range 6. Broadside aspect. The voice he uses for truth is a calm one. Searle nods into the dark and keeps his hands light. The Wellington slides down the invisible track the set lays, small corrections, big consequences. At 3 miles, Morgan says, hold your course. At 2, he says nothing, because sea clutter has climbed and he is listening with his eyes. Lamp armed, the second pilot says. His thumb hovers over the sprung toggle mounted just forward of the throttle quadrant. Your world shrinks to that thumb. At 1,600 yards, the ASV trace fuzzes to a guess. Searle trims, thumbs the recognition lights off out of reflex, feels the airplane take a denser bite of the night. Steady, steady. 1,000, Morgan says, almost a prayer. Searle nods. The second pilot presses the toggle. White explodes under the Wellington. It's not light, it's a place. A cone of hard, surgical day slams down on an iron-gray sea. In the center of it, a U-boat hangs in the act of being itself, conning tower framed like a stage, men frozen on a bridge, eyes wide as a god hand drops out of the sky. The wake is a polished snake. You see faces. You see the helmsman's shoulders tense. You see a man's cap lift in the slipstream of disbelief. The depth charge aimer already has the red eyepiece to his face. On, he leads the target like a cricketer, thumb on the release. Now. The stick walks off the racks, 6 canisters falling on their little parachutes, green fin steady. The charges hit and vanish, then the ocean heaves as if surprised. Columns rise, white and ragged, knocking the boat's stern to one side. The U-boat tries to turn under the blow, tries to grab depth like a hand groping for a rung. The light holds it, pitiless. Men on the bridge reach for the hatch. One stumbles, blinded, and goes to his knees, hands over his eyes. Searle hauls the Wellington through, skimming spray, engines thundering. In the tail, the gunner tracks the light's edge, half expecting tracer that doesn't come. The arc hisses contentment, then sputters, then steadies. Morgan calls, hard right, come about, let's see him. They bank. The cone swings like a scythe. The U-boat lies at a wrong angle, bow lifted, stern heavy, foam sucking. Diesel fumes and cordite make a smell you can taste even through rubber and leather. In the light, water blooms brown from the forward casing. A man waves something like a flag and then drops it to cover his face again from a sun that doesn't belong on a night sea. Second stick, the second pilot asks. Save them, Searle says, eyes narrowed. He's finished or he'll be under before we're back in. They hold the light for one more pass, as if to write the message on the water. Then Searle kills it with a flip and the world goes black so fast your eyes ache. You sit there, in a darkness that now feels like mercy, hearing your own breath roaring in your head. Hours later, they taxi in on a field that smells of wet grass and hot metal. In the debriefing room, Hops listens without blinking. Someone pours tea and forgets to drink it. The intelligence officer asks for positions twice and writes both down as if they agree. When they finish, a silence opens, and into it Searle says only, it works. Leigh stands in the doorway, cap in hand, chalk under his nails. He doesn't smile. He nods once, slow, as if something heavy has been finally set on the right shelf. June 4 to 5, 1942. The Bay of Biscay rolls under a moon smudged with high cloud. 172 Squadron is out in strength, Wellington's running racetracks along lanes the U-boats favor when they quit the concrete caves at Lorient and Street Nazir. On Beacon, you ride a line of radio compass bearings that feel like threads drawn through the dark by careful hands. Flight Lieutenant Arthur, Pip, Parker takes his turn on the hunt, the Leigh Light's fairing humming faintly in the slipstream. The crew doesn't talk about the lamp like it's a miracle. They talk about it the way you talk about a spanner that won't slip. ASV whispers early. Contact, 5 miles, broadside to us. Slow. Might be charging. The Wellington slides onto the vector without drama. There's comfort in the routine, check alt, check speed, trim, hands light, eyes where they should be. The new drill fits the old aircraft like a tailor has been through. At 2 miles, Parker eases lower, sets himself in the space between gray sky and blacker sea where things happen fast. The lamp switch guard is up before anyone remembers raising it. Lamp, Parker says. The second pilot's thumb moves like someone finishing a job they started yesterday. Light hits. A sun blossoms. Down in the cone, a U-boat freezes, then writhes, helm over, foam knuckling off the bow. Men vanish through the hatch like coins into a slot. The white wake writes panic, the light makes it confession. The aimer walks the stick across the foredeck. The little parachutes blink into the light as if saluting. The ocean lifts and slams. One charge goes long and still hits something that flinches. The conning tower disappears in a curtain of water that falls away and leaves no bridge watch standing. When the light clicks off, your eyes ache with the absence of it. You all breathe. Someone laughs once, sharp and surprised, like a hiccup. The radio operator, who hasn't said a word since the coast, keys a quick, spare contact report that will carry the smell of salt and arc ozone into the plot room at Chivener. Other crews find their marks. One Wellington lights a boat so suddenly the gunner sees hands come up, palms out, a human reflex when confronted by a white disk the size of the world. Another crew, low and hot, nearly eats spray on egress and goes home with salt crusted on the bomb bay doors and a story they won't tell as big as they could. Word moves in ways that don't require wires. In the concrete pens at Lorient, a machinist fits a Metox aerial, a crude crossed frame like a witch's ladder, to a conning tower. He jokes about the Biscay Cross, but his hands are careful. In Carnival Bunker, Admiral Karl Donitz frowns at a report that talks about light in the night and aircraft that come without warning. He thinks about his order to surface at night and vanish by day. He knows that if night turns against him, he loses half the ocean. At RAF Mountbatten, a Catalina's crew shares tea with a Wellington crew and argues, gently, about altitude and lamp timing. A Liberator from 120 Squadron taxis past, long wings dripping. Terry Bullock, T.E. Bullock, the man who presses on, is there in the mess later, boots muddy, eyes like flint with humor. Coastal Command is a patchwork of types and machines stitched by purpose. The lamp slips into that patchwork and starts throwing sparks. The Germans learn, and they learn fast. Some boats bristle with more flak, order gunners to stand and fight. A U-flak conversion will appear and disappear again when pilots take the hint and stand off, working from altitudes and angles that turn bravado into casualty lists. For now, June is about surprise and the new arithmetic, how long from light on to stick away, how far the boat rolls when the first column lifts, how bright the world is when you make the night your accomplice. A patrol in mid-June begins with rain-smeared glass and ends with shouts in the dark water. You hold the beam on a wounded boat as long as you can stand it, not for cruelty, but because men in a Corvette 30 miles away are cheating the compass to get to you. When their radar picks up your lamp's echo blooming like a ghost cloud, they steer for it, and below decks a petty officer debates whether to brew tea now or in 10 minutes when his hands stop shaking. On a dock in Devon under a pale dawn, Lee watches the ground crew unsling the lamps fairing for inspection. Carbon rods are chalky, the reflector freckled with salt. He runs a finger along a dent and then looks up at the pilot's scuffed boot prints on the wing root. How many? He asks. Enough, someone says, voice tired and proud. Enough to make them talk about us. That night, as wind hustles a weather front in from the west, 172 Squadron's chalkboard adds new notes in stubby handwriting, lamp at 1,200 yards, good picture. Boat dived under light. Stick long. Adjust aim. Arc steady. Generator belt to be tightened. It's the language of a trade in the middle of perfecting itself, small adjustments adding to something very large. A bay that used to help U-boats hides them less now. The Atlantic doesn't change its face for any man's invention. But sometimes, when the lamp flicks on and a cone of daylight pins a steel shape to the sea like a beetle under glass, you feel the war tilt, just a degree, toward justice. October 1942. Bay of Biscay. A Wellington noses down the throat of a rain squall and comes out the far side glittering with drops. In the back, the ASV set has started sulking. The operator wraps the casing with the heel of his hand, not because he believes it helps, but because machines respond to temperament. The contact he had at 6 miles has drifted, then steadied, then vanished in sea fog and guesswork. On the bridge of U-boat U something, numbers don't matter when the sea is this big, a sailor glances up at a new box lashed inside the conning tower, a wooden thing with a wireframe aerial shaped like a crude cross. The radio man calls it Metox, FUMB-1, after the French company that made bits of it. He has a headset on, and a wire of attention winds his face tight. When the set whispers its particular low, complaining buzz, he jabs a finger forward and the watch officer's hand goes to the klaxon like a reflex. Alarm! By the time the Wellington's operator says, "Contact again," for miles, the boat is already leaning, bow down, air streaming past the tower as the ocean takes her back. The night that used to be a cloak has learned to warn them. Coastal Command feels it, the way a fish learns that bait has a hook. Back at Chivener and at Ballykelly and at St. Eval, pilots learn to nurse their sets, to time their sweeps, to hold silence like breath. Lee's lamp still overwhelms human eyes when it hits, but human ears, tuned by Metox, are getting an earlier chance to choose the latter. For every boat caught mid-gasp with a white cone on its back, another slips under with the lamp arriving a beat too late, boiling water and curses marking where it was. In a fortress of brick and secrecy at Malvern and at TRE, Telecommunications Research Establishment, men in lab coats drag wires over benches and mutter about wavelengths. The cavity magnetron purrs on a table like a cat made of copper. ASV Mk3, centimetric radar, goes from paper to prototype to aeroplane in the way anxiety makes miracles move faster. 10 centimeters instead of a meter and a half. Metox is deaf to it. The ocean's skin looks different at that wavelength, sea clutter sits where it's told. January 1943, RAF Nuts Corner. A Liberator GRV from 224 Squadron looms under hangar lamps, its belly immeasurably full of promise. Under the outboard wing, a streamlined pod holds a Leigh Light. Inside the nose, a dark, unlovely dish sits behind a cover, cargo of secrets. Flight Lieutenant Peter Clements walks the length of her like a farmer checking a fence. He pats the pod as he goes by. "Don't let me down, love." In the ready room, Sir Philip Joubert has given way to a new AOC&C, Air Marshal Sir John Slessor, who speaks softly and reads numbers like weather. He wants the bay fleeced. He wants the gap closed. The Liberator, with its brutal endurance, is the thing to do it. Night patrol. The bay is a field of graphite. Clements' Liberator slides at 500 feet, engines chewing air steady as sleep. In the back, the new ASV hums a tone the operator already loves, clean, sharp, a scalpel instead of a spoon. Contact, 8 miles, steady, no drift. No Metox buzz smarts this time on the boat's bridge, no wooden cross twitches. The first the watch officer knows of an airplane is when a shadow passes over the wake, then returns as a wall of white. "Lamp," Clement says. The pod slams day down onto night. It's a different world than the Wellingtons, a longer wing, a calmer beast when low. Below, the boat is big in a way a man feels in his stomach. Men on the bridge throw arms up, then turn to the hatch. The aimer is already calling the beat. The stick goes, the arcs rise, the Atlantic delivers the blow. You see oil. You see wood. You see a man in the water throw his cap away because a cap weighs more than a life now. The lamp clicks off. The afterimage floats behind your eyes in green and violet. The operator runs the ASV again, sees a smear, calls it, and it answers with a tumble of noise that is not a target but your own pulse. Word reaches Carnival. Donuts has known fear, it is a professional hazard. He does not show it. He orders more flak, then heavier. He tries U-flaks, boats that ride high with quadruple 20 MMS and bait the aircraft, daring them to come low and into a net of tracer. It works once or twice, until pilots answer with altitude and discipline and a reluctance to die that cannot be argued with. He orders boats to run the bay in daylight under air escort, FW-200s and Ju-88s appear and vanish like grudging guardians. The bay learns to be full of noise. In March, a Liberator from 86 Squadron paints a boat with light short of the Spanish coast and holds it while a sloop thunders in, bow gun barking. The escort's lamp finds the airplane's beam like it was a road. A boy on the Liberator's starboard waist watches the tracers skim the cone, bright bugs in a white jar, and feels the edges of the world meet. The Leigh Light changes something subtle in cruise. You plan for the last mile as if it's all there is. You rehearse the thumb on the switch with your eyes closed, you say the aimer's cadence in your sleep, you carry the afterimage into your daylight. You trust the lamp to keep a promise your radar started. And when the centimeter set hums like a secret you're allowed to know, you feel ahead of an enemy for once. None of this looks like victory yet. It looks like hard work in bad weather. It looks like carbon rods that burn shorter than you'd like and belts that snap and crews that grumble and fix and go anyway. It looks like the Bay of Biscay beginning, night by night, to act like it belongs more to men with lamps and magnetrons than to men with periscopes. May 9, 1943. Pre-dawn, northwest of Cape Finisterre. The Atlantic smells of iron and salt and something like electricity when the wind comes from the southwest. A Liberator of 224 Squadron, its underwing pod pregnant with light, prowls along the inbound lane at 600 feet. The crew is quiet in the way men are when the pattern of a hunt is older than the nerves that feed it. Contact, starboard 10, 9 miles. No drift. The ASV man doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. The pilot, Flight Lieutenant Ian Grant, slides the aircraft a degree and a half and trims her hands off so that every correction is a thought and not a shove. Down below, U-boat lookouts blink into a wind that smells like freedom. Metox is a comfort again after months of whispers about a radar that makes no sound. The operator listens and hears nothing, and in hearing nothing, makes the most human mistake: he believes he is safe. He lights a cigarette and cups it, a little warmth on a cold night. Grant's Liberator ghosts in. The lamp goes on and does that thing it always does, makes men into silhouettes and machines into sculptures. The boat is bracketed in white. You see faces where the lamp insists they exist. A gun starts to turn toward you and stalls, its crew confused by a sun where there should be stars. The stick drops. The boat rolls. The ocean throws its shoulders up. The wireless hums with other men's business. Convoys ONS-5 and SC-130 drag salt scars across the mid-Atlantic, slow herds with teeth now, support groups that sprint where the wolf pack bites, HF/DF bearings that point to hounds in the dark, destroyers that turn toward a ping and don't blink. A Catalina's crew holds a boat on the surface with lamp and voice and circles until a sloop can fire the shot that makes the night speak. At Carnival, in the concrete belly under Loria, Admiral Karl Donitz reads returns that sound like a drumroll on a coffin lid. U-boats report being caught in cones of light, in sudden day. Centimetric radar turns approaches into ambushes. Leigh Light crews wrench men off the surface before they can find the safety of depth. Where Metox warned, it now consoles. Where flak barked, it now coughs. In the bay, a U-flak meets its use-by date. The experiment ends under beams and bomb marks. May 14. A 120 Squadron Liberator late in its patrol sweeps a lane and finds what everyone is finding, a boat where a boat should be. The lamp hits, the ocean lifts. The crew's voices crackle with that stripped-down language you only hear when men are moving and the world is keeping pace. They come home with salt in their eyebrows and report just like that: lamp on, target fixed, stick away, oil seen, lamp off. The chalkboard grows spare and eloquent. May 24. Donitz sends the signal that will be read in 100 wardrooms and remembered with complicated faces. Withdraw from the North Atlantic. Eat the losses, count the boats that limp in and hide their wounds under the slab roofs of Loria, St. Nazaire, Louisiana Palace. Change tactics. Think. He is not a man who leaves a hunt because the quarry is clever, he leaves because the field has changed and he knows the math of stubbornness. In a coastal command ready room that smells of damp cork, Air Marshal Sir John Slessor stands with hands in pockets and reads his own signals with a mouth that won't cheat a smile. He knows better than to make it a trophy. He makes it an order to keep going. The bay is still full of teeth. June will need the lamp as much as May did. Night after night, the cone finds boats that thought dark made them ghosts. The afterimages add up. Liberators from 86 Squadron, 224 Squadron, 120 Squadron, Wellingtons from 172 and 179, Sunderland's muscular on the swell, their guns bristling. The lamp rides with all of them, switches taped where thumbs find them, generators checked with a rigger's superstitions. On one patrol, the arc sputters and dies mid-run, the pilot makes the drop in blind belief and luck throws him a bone, boiling, brown water and men clawing their way toward rafts that blundered into place through mercy or habit. On escort carriers, Biter, Archer, Vindex, Swordfish and Martlets, Avengers and Wildcats fly CAPs and Codas. The carriers drag air cover across the convoys like a shawl. The lamp's light isn't their trick, but its thread is in their heads too, a thing that says night will no longer be the friend it was. On the ground at Pre-Danak, a fitter lays fresh carbons in a lamp housing with the care of a man setting a table. He wipes the reflector with alcohol and a cloth that never touches anything else. He closes the panel and slaps it once, his own ritual. Out on the hardstand, a pilot walks around the wing and lets his hand trail along the leading edge, counting rivets like a rosary. May ends. Coastal Command's board shows U-boats sunk in a column that looks like somebody has been careless with tally marks. The crews don't tick them off with glee. They mark them with a sense of something more complicated, relief, yes, but also the knowledge that the ocean eats memory faster than it eats steel. In the quiet after a landing, when the metal cools and pings and men drink mugs that scald their tongues, someone brings up the first night the lamp went on, and the room softens the way men do when they remember a beginning with the grace of hindsight. September 1943. Night off the Gironda estuary. The air is warm, heavy with the smell of land coming off the rivers. A Wellington from 179 Squadron hovers at the edge of a cloud bank and noses out, a moth skimming a lamp. In the back, the ASV operator scratches a note in a log book with pencil that squeaks in the pressurized silence, Mk3, clean return, boat outbound. He underlines clean. The lamp has become routine, which is the highest compliment a tool can earn. The switch guard is where muscle memory expects, the generator's belt has the give a rigger likes, the carbons are properly nibbled to shape, like cigars with teeth marks. The aimer's cadence is baked into men's spines, on, now. The U-boats know it like a prayer they hate, men who have lived under it will remember that white, clinical day when they are old and nobody believes them. Tonight, the boat sees the world turn white and reacts with a speed that would have saved him a year ago. The hatch eats men with discipline. The helm bites. The bow goes down. The Wellington's light follows him to the lip. The stick of charges scythes across the arc of where he will be. The water goes up, then down, then settles with oil freckles on top. You feel the airplane's belly as a bass note when spray slaps it. The pilot pulls away and the gunner leans out of his turret a fraction, because that's what bodies do when eyes want more. The lamp dies with the smell of ozone and the sound of carbons chattering into cool. At Ballykelly, a Liberator crew crowds into the photo section to stare at prints still wet enough to warp. The beam is there, a white pillar on a black sea, the boat caught inside it like a fly. Someone taps the emulsion with a fingertip too hard and gets a glare from the WAAF at the dryer. Don't touch the world while it's setting, she says, and everybody smiles because it's a better line than it knows. In the pens at Lorient, concrete drips and the sound is like a clock nobody can stop. Boats go out with more guns and fewer illusions. They dive earlier. They run shallower under escort. They creep by day and do nothing by night. The lamp has changed the breath of the war. Admiral Donitz shifts wolves to the South Atlantic and the Arctic, to coastal waters and ambushes that feel like spite. The bay never forgets what light can do. New tricks join old. Rockets, 8-pounders slung under Liberator wings, crack and snarl into bows that used to shrug off splinters. Fido, the acoustic torpedo, arrives and whispers and gives aircraft a sting in the tail for boats that make it under with luck and blasphemy. None of it replaces the lamp, it complements it. The last mile is still the place you win or lose. A light tells men where to put their courage. One wet November, a crew brings a lamp back in pieces. The fairing took a hit from something, flak or freak, and shattered. The pilot lands heavy, drags the carcass into dispersal, and feels a weird nakedness. They fly the next patrol without a lamp because the schedule says they must. They find a boat by radar, come in low, and drop blind. They see nothing but white scars. They go home quiet. 2 days later, the riggers bolt a new lamp under the wing, and the crewman who will thumb the switch runs his fingers over the toggle like a man checking the teeth on a key. By Christmas, the lamp has its own folklore. A Czech in 311 Squadron names his light, Lucerna, in chalk before each patrol. A Scot in 172 taps the housing twice with his knuckles, always the same rhythm. A Canadian insists on cleaning the reflector himself, because trust is a particular thing in war. Squadron leader Humphrey de Verdley visits units without ceremony, watches crews cup cigarettes and grin at nothing much, and feels a quiet pride that doesn't need applause. When someone tries to clap him on the back, he dodges it like turbulence and asks about generator belts. In a sloop's wardroom on a sea that smells of fish and victory and fatigue, a lieutenant commander remembers a night when he drove toward a bloom on his surface set like it was a lighthouse and found men in a dinghy with eyes like coins and a smell that took the varnish off the air. He writes a note in a log, found survivors under air beam. Lamp was our star. War rolls on, ugly and inventive. But in the bay, in the lanes that run from Biscay pens to deep water, the terms have changed. Night is no longer a sanctuary, it is a stage. U-boats figure their odds by counting not just escorts and courses, but lamps, how many, how bright, how far apart. The men who hunt them count carbons and hours until moonrise and the way a thumb feels on a spring-loaded switch. January 1944. A new crew walks out to a Liberator that smells of dope and oil and rain. The pilot, 21 and putting on calm like a jacket 2 sizes too big, trails his hand along an underwing pod. "We'll make it day," he says, and doesn't know he has just quoted men he'll never meet. The ocean waits without comment. Later, much later, in rooms where the walls hold heat and the windows look over lawns, aging men will close their eyes and see that cone of white again, inside their heads, inside the dark behind their eyelids. They'll smell hot ozone and salt and cordite and oil, all at once. They'll feel the thump under their boots when water lifts. They'll see faces and never know names. And maybe they'll think about a slight man with chalk on his fingers who drew a circle under a Wellington and told the night it had to share. Leigh reads the letter twice, then folds it along the creases and slips it into the inside pocket of his tunic as if that will keep the words warm. Outside, the rain has rounded off to a mist that beads on his eyelashes. The hangar lights throw long, smoky cones across the hardstand, and a Liberator squats under one of them like a tired dog. "Sir," a fitter calls from the lamp cradle, knuckles black with carbon dust. "She's chattering when we yaw. We shimmed the spring, but she still spits." Leigh crouches without ceremony, cap shoved back, the elegant staff officer silhouette folding into a mechanic's hunch. He lays a fingertip against the sprung holder and rocks it gently. "You're asking it to bite and smile at the same time," he murmurs, "the way you talk to a stubborn hinge. Back the tension off half a turn. Then set your gap a hair under a 1/4 inch. Carbon's like discipline more than force." The fitter does as told. They power the generator. The arc kisses, protests, then settles to that hot, surgical hiss. The reflector fills with a clean, white coin. Leigh watches the light eat mist and nods. "There we are. Don't burn the sea for comfort. Burn it when the aimer sings, now." April 1944, pre-Danak. A runway slick with Cornish rain. A 224 Squadron Liberator edges onto the flare path, engines flexing a muscle you feel in your ribs. Leigh stands with a WAAF corporal whose hands are deft and gentle with things that break. She holds a clipboard out of the weather and recites the generator checks as if they're prayer. Belt tension, set. Brushes, seated. Bearing temp, cool to touch. Switch guard, secured. He listens like a conductor, eyes on the underwing pod as it swings past. He raises a palm to the pilot's silhouette and gets a small salute back. Then the big aeroplane goes light on its wheels and climbs into a sky with more night than cloud in it. He doesn't go to the mess after this one. He walks to the photo hut instead and stands under the red light while a WAAF tech slides paper through a bath that smells like pennies. The first print is from last week, white beam, black sea, a boat framed like a crime scene. The second is fresh from the tray, the same cone, different boat, same startled geometry of men and machines shocked into stillness. Leigh leans closer and sees the little things, spray feathering off the bow, a man's arm up against impossible daylight, the faint ghost of wake stripes seared into the sea. He says, "Thank you," to the tech, and means it the way he means it to pilots and fitters and men who hold hoses. He rides one of the trials nights himself in May, because you cannot ask men to trust a thing you will not sit next to. A 172 Squadron Wellington, old bones humming, holds steady at 500 feet. In the back, his hands grip a frame that contributes nothing to lift or thrust but feels like something to hold on to. The operator calls the plot, clean, the new Mk3 singing suite. Leigh watches the pilot's thumb rest against the sprung toggle. He hates the part where time stretches thin and brittle, where the radar is about to die into sea clutter and the lamp has not yet made the world real. Then the thumb moves, and light slams down, and a steel shape is trapped in the bright like a thought caught in the act of being formed. The aimer's cadence threads the seconds. The stick walks. The sea hurls up its answer. The Wellington shoulders through spray, and Leigh finds he has been holding his breath and lets it go with a noise only he hears. He comes down from that flight and signs nothing ceremonious. He puts a note in the margin of a typed sheet instead, employment of searchlight, airborne, Leigh Light, procedure for night attack, adding a line about thumb discipline and the temptation to ride the light before the aimer is ready. In the corner, he writes in pencil, light is a promise. Keep it only when you mean it. The Air Ministry sends him a thin envelope with heavy words one afternoon. He opens it in a drafty office that smells of paste and damp paper. He reads the line that recognizes inventiveness and service and sets the letter down the way a man sets down a spanner that unexpectedly fits. The phone rings before he has a chance to feel anything large about it. A squadron at Ballykelly has a lamp that blows its arc in turbulence. He tucks the envelope under a blotter he never uses and says, I'll be there in the morning. There are funerals too. A row of caps, rain on shoulders, a padre whose voice is steady enough to bear weight. After, in a hangar that echoes in a way you feel in your chest, a crew chief shows Leigh a lamp fairing with a ragged wound where flak found it. The metal is torn clean, as if the sky had teeth. We held them in the beam, the chief says, and wipes his eyes with the back of a hand that smells of dope and oil. Leigh nods, and for once has nothing useful to add. He puts a hand on the rim of the hole as if to measure it, and leaves his palm there a moment longer than a measurement takes. Summer carries the war north and south. The bay still bites but not like it bit. Leigh moves like a quiet weather system between stations, Chivener, Thorney, Nuts Corner, checking belts, asking pilots where their thumbs sit when they are tired, standing in doorways while men tell stories trimmed down to the good bones. In a corner of a training room, he watches a warrant officer instruct a class of new crews. The man draws a cone on a blackboard, chalk dust thinning his voice, and when he says, there, tapping the point where aim and light meet, Leigh feels that warm, specific pride that has nothing to do with medals and everything to do with a craft catching. One evening, he and Group Captain Frank Hops stand by a fence and watch the sky turn the color of tea. Hops chews the inside of his cheek and nods toward the line of pods under wings. We asked night to share, he says. We were impertinent. Leigh smiles a little. We were practical. A Liberator turns final with the lamp still slung under her wing, scarred and sea-worn. Wheels chirp. Men walk toward her with chocks. In the last light, the arc glass in the pod flashes once, a small, private wink. Leigh lifts 2 fingers off the fence slat as if returning a salute. August 1944. Dusk slides over the Bay of Biscay like oil, thick and reflective. A Liberator GRV of 224 Squadron loafs at 700 feet, for Pratt & Whitney's droning a note you can feel in your teeth. Flight Lieutenant Ian Grant leans forward in his harness, thumb resting against the sprung guard of the lamp switch. The underwing pod hums faintly in the slipstream, a sleeper who will wake fast. In the radio alcove, the ASV Mk3 operator, Sergeant Lewis, hunches to the greenlit scope. Contact, starboard 10, 7 miles, small return. His voice has that careful neutral that means he trusts what he's seeing but doesn't understand it yet. Small often means low. Low often means snorkel. Down there, the war has changed shape. The U-boat doesn't ride the night like a road now, it breathes through a tube, hides most of its steel under black water, shows only a stub that snatches air and leaves a V-shaped spore. Metox gave way to Naxos, another ear. Some boats hear the magnetrons whisper now, some don't. The snorkel hisses and chokes and sucks and makes men sick, but it denies the lamp an easy target. The last mile is still everything, the last yard has become meaner. Range 5, Lewis calls. No drift. That's him. Grant pushes an inch of throttle, feels the Liberator steady into the work. The nose dips a hand's breadth. The horizon is a dark saw. In the right seat, the second pilot flips the guard with a practiced nail flick, exposing the toggle. The depth charge aimer slides his face to the red eyepiece, left hand resting on the release, right hand cupped to the intercom. His voice is the metronome everyone trusts. On, on, on. At 2 miles, sea clutter rises like static after a secret. Grant eases lower. The new centimeter set sits clean longer, showing a sliver where the ocean wants to show a smear. Then it goes. The world is guesswork for 2 breaths. Lamp, Grant says. The cone explodes downward, sudden noon on black glass. For a half second there's nothing but glitter. Then the beam finds the seam of wake, a pale chevron boiling off something not quite seen. In the center, the snorkel's head throws a brief, obscene spray. A periscope vane gleams and vanishes like a fish scale. You catch the suggestion of a deck rounding underwater, the ghost of a conning tower just below the skin. The aimer walks the stick where the wake will be when the sea heaves. Now. 6 canisters step off the rails, fins clean, parachutes snapping open like flowers forced. They pepper the V ahead of the light, a fan cut to measure. The ocean lifts in white fists. The snorkel disappears in a brown cough. A black lung of oil rolls up, slow and heavy, then spreads with the reluctant beauty of a wound. Grant hauls left, the big wing chewing damp air. In the waist blister, the gunner leans into the slip and watches the beam paint a ragged oval on chop that licks at nothing and everything. The lamp sputters once, carbons chattering in the slipstream, then steadies into its hot, surgical hiss. Come back through, the second pilot says. They arc. The cone swings like a scythe across the place where the sea is thinking hard. A shape heaves, just for a heartbeat, the forward casing breaking surface with the awkward grace of a whale that has forgotten how to breathe. You see 3 men in that impossible noon, eyes shut, mouths open, then the sea claps again and takes them. Fido, the wireless op throws, voice rough. Grant hesitates. The acoustic torpedo rides ears, hunting prop songs, a snorkel boat with engines deep and turning slow is a fair mark. But the stick has done its honest work. Oil keeps coming. Negative, he says. Hold it. Let's call them in. Lewis keys the set, voice clipped as code. Surface escort, this is Blue 2, beam on target, bearing 310 from my mark, 15 miles. He repeats, then listens to the ether crackle an answer that sounds like a sloop captain smiling with his teeth shut. They hold the lamp over the oil, over spray, over debris that wasn't sure it was debris a minute ago. A tin pan, a splinter of ladder, the obscene bob of a kapok. The cone becomes a lighthouse. 10 minutes later, a white bow wave shoulders up the night. A black Swan-class sloop muscles in, bows dark and wet, signal lamp winking. Her Oerlikon stare past the Liberator as if daring the sky to argue. The sloop's bridge crew doesn't need charts, they drive straight up the beam as if it were a string pulled taut from God's hand to theirs. Beam off, Grant says when the corvette takes station, her scrambling nets and boat crews already in motion. He clicks the toggle. The cone dies, leaving an afterimage that throbs in the skull like a memory you can't quite look at. Night slams back in, wet and intimate. For a second the crew sits in blindness, breathing loud through rubber and wool. Then instruments reassert their small, sane glows. They circle once more. The sloop's men haul with their backs, voices carrying in strips that the wind shreds and gives back in pieces. A sailor in a boat looks up and raises a hand, the Liberator dips a wing in answer, a small, human thing under a sky that doesn't care. Later, farther north, an RAF Sunderland shoulders through weather fit for iron fish and finds another snorkel by the bleeding edge of moonlight. The flying boat's lamp carves a cone across whitecaps whipped into cursive by a gale. She comes in heavy, throws depth charges into a wake that shouts and then lies. The crew laugh on the way home, not from joy, but from the relief of ending a thing that started ugly and might have stayed that way. Autumn thickens. The bay is less a killing ground now than a threshold men cross quickly if they can. German air cover comes thin and late. U-boats learn to run submerged day and night, to come up grudgingly under rain, to refuse radios unless they must. The lamp still rides the Liberators and Wellingtons, a promise and a threat both, ready for the moment a snorkel coughs wrong or a watch officer gambles an extra 10 minutes for batteries. One thick night off Penmark H, a 179 Squadron Wellington fights ice on the wings and salt in the throat and finds a snorkel anyway, the ASV a whisper, the lamp a knife. The aimer's cadence threads the storm. The stick goes, the sea answers. In the rear, the gunner laughs like he hasn't in months, a crack in a wall that needed it. On Thorny's hardstand, Humphrey de Verdely steps into a puddle that mirrors the underwing pods like tired moons and doesn't notice. He's listening to a fitter gripe about brush wear and to a pilot confess that sometimes his thumb wants the light on early because early feels like control. Leigh's answer is gentle and implacable. Hold your nerve to the last yard, he says. Make night your accomplice, not your crutch. The lamp is no longer a miracle. It is a habit. And habits, good ones, win wars an inch at a time, in cones of daylight that last 6, 8, 10 seconds and change the shape of a sea. May 10, 1945. 2:40 hours. North Atlantic, 50 miles northwest of Malin Head. The sea is polished slate under a thin, high moon. A Liberator GR-6 of 86 Squadron ghosts along at 700 feet, for Pratt & Whitney R1830s turning with the calm of a clock that has outlived the hour it was made for. In the right seat, Flying Officer Jack Mallory runs a knuckle under the sprung guard of the lamp switch out of habit and not need. In the glow palace of the ASV Mk3, Sergeant Mac McAllister sits forward, face washed green. His pencil moves in small, neat ticks across a grease pencil plot. Contact, bearing 275, range 8, broadside drift, slow. His voice is matter-of-fact, but the old prickle comes anyway. The last mile is still a place where men's hands remember how to sweat. The wireless operator has a folded sheet by his elbow, signal to enemy submarines, English and German. It says, in block print and hard grammar, what weeks of signals have already said, surface. Fly black flags by day. Obey orders. Proceed to Allied ports. The war is over, and yet the ocean has a way of keeping its own counsel. Bring her on, the captain, Flight Lieutenant Ian Grant, says, tone level. He eases the Liberator's nose, trims with 2 economical thumb presses. The bay doors are shut and safed, the bomb-aimer lies at his station anyway, chin on fist, watching the dark as if it were a map he knows by rivers and not by names. At 5 miles, the return fattens. At 3, it steadies. At 2, the sea tries to climb the scope with clutter and fails. The boat has surfaced and stayed so, there is no metalk snarl in anyone's ears because there is no need to listen. Men on a black deck breathe air they did not believe they'd taste again. Someone has tied a square of white to the forward rail that lifts and drops like a gull. Grant doesn't need the lamp to find him. He wants it anyway, not as a hammer, but as a hand raised to a face. Lamp, he says softly. Mallory flips the toggle. Day falls from the wing. The cone is cleaner than you remember it, because you are not hunting, you are showing. In the center, a Type 7 hangs honest and naked, deck rails shining, men on the bridge throwing arms up not against a blow but against the old reflex to be blinded. The white flag snaps, absurd and absolute. The conning tower number, chalked large by a careful hand, gleams. Someone below waves a lamp back, the answers come in Morse, stilted, polite, precise. You whatever, numbers are not important, requests instructions. He turns his head from your unearned sun and then turns it back, steadier. Right, Grant says. The WAP slides the signal canister into the chute, the Allied orders rolled tight, a little wait for the fall, and smacks the panel. The cylinder skips twice across the wake and rocks up against the boat's forward casing. A young German in a sweater the color of rope skitters down, grabs it, and looks up into the beam like a man staring into a story someone else told him. He trots it to the watch officer, who breaks it open, reads, nods, and, after a pause that feels longer than a page, salutes the light. Escort will take him, Mac murmurs, ear to the set. HMS Loch Fada is running up from the south, a Loch-class frigate with a temper for discipline and a bow that pushes a private geography in front of it. She calls in, clipped and dry. Maintain station. Aircraft, keep your beam. Grant holds the cone. The lamp hisses its surgical hiss. The Liberator idles a patient oval, the beam painting the boat and the square of sea around it like a stage. Men on the U-boat's foredeck gather, their faces too white in the unnatural day. A petty officer, any Navy's petty officer, bullies them into order. A tin trunk comes up from below with a clank. Papers meet fire in a bucket, and then the bucket meets the sea, and then someone remembers they need the papers now and curses in a tone that translates across languages. Loch Fada shoulders into the circle of light as if stepping into a photograph. Her 4-inch guns stare into irrelevance. Her signalman flashes a sequence that makes the U-boat's crew lean forward in the beam like schoolboys at a blackboard. The German watch officer answers with his Aldous, stiff-backed. The human choreography is exact and very old. Lamp off, Grant says, after a nod from the frigate's bridge. He clicks. The cone dies. Night returns like a blanket you had forgotten was warm. For a moment, everyone on the aircraft inhales in the same silent, private way, as if each has just put down a weight he'd learned to carry without remark. They turn east for a beat, then west, because the ether is busy with other surrenders, other coordinates. At 3:50, they pick up another return, smaller, twitchy, a snorkel's rude profile on a sea that has lost its appetite for killing. The lamp is not needed, the voice is. Grant leans on the interphone. We'll talk him up. They drop a flare, not to blind but to announce, a soft, floating sun that says, this way, and not, die. The boat comes up, slow and chastened. The lamp stays cold. The sloop HMS Bentinck is already angling for him, white bow riding intent. Dawn finds them curving low over Loch Arable, the sea loch in Sutherland that has turned into a pen for iron fish. U-boats lie at anchor like sullen cattle, decks stripped, crews managed into neatness. A few carry horrible, homemade flags striped white and black because someone's pride needed a shape to give up. Coastal aircraft orbit above like quiet gulls, lamps dark, bellies clean. That afternoon, at Thorney Island, Humphrey de Verdely stands in a doorway with his cap in his hand and watches a Liberator taxi in with salt-dried white on her flanks. The underwing pod is streaked and scabbed with ocean. The crew clatter down and stretch backs gone stiff with endurance. Mallory, who has been thumbing that toggle for 2 years, touches his forefinger to the pod as he passes, a farewell to a faithful thing. Sir, the captain says, catching Leigh's eye. We used it, differently. Leigh's mouth tucks at the corner. Light is light, he says. What we do with it changes men. Evening, and the mess is loud in a way that has nothing to do with victory toasts and everything to do with relief on a long fuse. A rigger at the bar jokes that they'll bolt the lamps to lifeboats next, for finding pubs. Someone sings poorly, someone else throws him a cushion in mercy. Leigh slips away before it curdles into sentiment. Outside, the air smells of oil and grass and the sea that has been both enemy and accomplice. He walks the perimeter into a dusk that isn't a threat anymore. An underwing pod catches the last of the light and sends it back in a small, clean wink. June 22, 1945. RAF Predanach, Cornwall. Morning rain needles the dispersal, thin and cold. A Liberator sits on trestles, bay doors open, her underwing pod streaked with salt and oil. 2 riggers in rolled sleeves loosen the last bolts as if they're undoing a button on a well-worn coat. The lamp cradle comes free by inches, reluctant as habit. Humphrey de Verdely stands close enough to smell hot dope and damp canvas. He rests 2 fingers on the pharynx rim, then lifts his hand as the cradle dips. Mind the reflector, he says, out of reflex and affection both. Yes, sir, the senior rigger replies, voice soft. They lower the lamp onto a trolley padded with sacking. The carbon carrier is tawny with dust. The sprung holder still rocks sweetly under a fingertip. A flight lieutenant from 224 Squadron walks up with that half-bewildered look men wear when the thing that got them through is being put away. Sir, he says, offering a hand. Grant. We, brought one home on it last week. Not a kill. A surrender. Leigh takes the hand. Good, he says simply. It was always a light first. The Liberator rolls forward a few feet and an airman with chalk scrawls a date on the pod before anyone can stop him. June 1945. The white line looks like a smile that doesn't quite know how. July 8, 1945. Loch Arable, Sutherland. The sea loch is a slate mirror under a high, clean sky. U-boats lie at anchor in lines that make the water look ruled. HMS Havelock idles past at a respectful trot, signal flags brisk, the bridge crew tidy. On Havelock's starboard wing, a petty officer shades his eyes and points. There, see? The chalk. On a conning tower, big numbers glow in sun, clumsy, careful. Men on the German deck stand with caps off, faces tilted to the warmth like plants that forgot about it. Overhead, a Halifax of 518 Squadron drones by with a casual dignity. No pod under her wing. No lamp needed. She banks once and winks with an Aldous, and on Havelock's bridge a young sub-lieutenant flashes back without looking at his Morse card. The sea answers with a gull's thin cry and a tiny slap against steel. September 3, 1945. London, Adastral House. A corridor smells of polish and paper. Leigh sits opposite a door with a plate that has too much gilt and not enough space. A clerk sets a file in front of him with hands that know how to lay weight lightly. Inside, there are photographs, cones of white on black water, little chalk arrows, notes typed by men who will be farmers or bus drivers soon. A line in a letter waits for his eyes, appointed officer of the Order of the British Empire. He folds the paper once and slides it back into the file as if leaving a bookmark in a story he is not finished with. Congratulations, squadron leader, the clerk says. Leigh nods, says, thank you, and means it, and also hears a generator belt slap once on a wet night in his head and smiles at that, too. November 14, 1945. Loria, Caraman Pens. The concrete is shocking in its indifference. Rain falls in sheets off the parapets as if the sky is tipping. A British naval liaison, Lieutenant Commander Arthur Bell, walks with a German civilian engineer who keeps both hands in the pockets of a coat that has seen too much wet. They speak in a spare, professional language that leaves room for weather. The light, the German says at last, staring out at a basin that smells of rust. Your aircraft, at night, it was like, the doctor's lamp. He grimaces at his own word. For a split second, you are the only thing in the world, and then there is only water. Bell nods once. He doesn't offer anything to soften it. December 20, 1945. RAF Thorney Island. The instructional cinema hut is warm and dark and smells of wet wool and cigarettes. On the screen, white blooms over black, a beam opening like an eye. A narrator in the dry tone of the Directorate of Training reads from a script about approach speeds, ASV range, lamp engagement. In the back row, a new crew watches in a silence that has curiosity in it but not fear. The war's edge has dulled, the craft has not. When the beam hits, one of the men inhales, quieter than a match. Leigh sits 2 rows from the front, alone, hands folded. He knows every frame. He still feels the old pull in his shoulder when the moment comes, the thumb on the sprung switch, the arcs hiss, the afterimages ache. When the lights come up, he stands without hurry and lets the men file past. One glances at him and frowns, as if trying to place a face from a diagram. Leigh enjoys that, too. March 4, 1946. A hangar at Chivener. Trestles, tarpaulins, a smell of varnish and tired air. On a workbench, a lamp housing sits polished like a trophy. Someone has chalked on its inside rim, where only a rigger would see, Lucerna, 172. Beside it lies a coil of generator belt, stiff with age, and a little muslin-wrapped bundle of spare carbons tied with waxed thread. A WAF corporal unwraps it, runs a thumb over the rods, and rewraps them the way you'd tuck a child in. She sets the bundle in a crate marked training stores and looks away for a second longer than the task needs. June 9, 1946. Hamburg, Altona Station. A train exhales steam like an old man. On the platform, a former Obersturman stares at a newspaper with a photograph of a beam pinning a boat. He taps the picture with a finger and tells his brother-in-law, softly, it wasn't like that. And it was exactly like that. He closes the paper as if he might trap the light inside it. October 12, 1947. A village hall near Ilfracombe. A Coastal Command Association meet. Tea urns, buns, a banner that sags slightly between 2 nails. Men with hair cut short out of habit and shoes polished because their wives asked them to. In a corner, a small display, photographs, a bent prop tip, a Leigh Light carbine in a wooden cradle like a relic. An old coxswain from a sloop stands over it and tells a boy, we set our course by that when the dark had ideas. Evening settles in layers. Outside, a car backfires and nobody flinches. Inside, someone starts a song and somebody else joins until the tune is the shape of a memory with edges smoothed by time. Leigh steps out into damp air and pulls his scarf snug. He walks along the lane until the village lights thin and the hedges lean in. The sky is a low lid. Somewhere out beyond the cliff, the Atlantic moves with the patience of a thing that cannot be hurried. He stops where he can hear it best and closes his eyes. For a moment, he can make out the hiss, the Ark's voice, and the slap of spray against the belly and the calm, clipped, now, that lives in bone and not in air. He opens his eyes. The night is just night.